My name is Naina, and I'm a product manager on the AMP project.
And I'm Adam, and I work on product partnerships for AMP and the web at Google. Now we're going to talk about a lot of new and different things happening with AMP today, but before we do, we want to give a quick refresher on what exactly AMP is and what problem it's been working to solve. Now it wouldn't be Google I/O if we didn't talk about web performance, but it's real. Users of the web today are increasingly used to and even demand strong performance from the sites they visit. And they reward that speed and performance when they experience it. But the challenge remains that across all sorts of web experiences, those demands are often not met. And not meeting them can have real-life consequences for businesses that operate online. So this is where AMP comes in. AMP is an open source project that began a few years ago to help combat performance issues on the web. And there are several key aspects to how it works. One is that AMP is a library of components built on top of HTML, specifically designed for performance. Another is that the AMP format mandates a handful of rules about its pages that are again focused on maintaining performance, but also on enabling caching. And this ability to cache and serve remotely is what allows platforms serving AMPs to pre-render them effectively. For example, Google Search serves AMP pages from a cache, and that content loads for a user on average in a half second. Now, one other important feature of AMP is that it's always up to date. If you build with AMP, you have a team of engineers at your disposal working to ensure your own site is constantly upgraded to the latest version. From an engagement and revenue perspective, the performance benefits can be really meaningful. Sites that build with AMP are seeing higher conversion rates, lower bounce rates, increases in click-through rates, higher revenue per page, and more. And that's whether you are an advertiser, a publisher, an e-commerce site, or something else. You can see examples of several of those categories here, and you can find many more case studies on our website. Now, as an open source project, AMP was developed and built by many different tech companies, publishers, and other organizations. And the ecosystem today includes the platforms that link out to AMP pages, like Twitter and Bing and Yahoo Japan and others, as well as content management systems like WordPress, EC3, Cafe24, and Vtex that allow creators to easily build AMP pages on their platforms. But it also includes top e-commerce, travel, news, and other types of sites from across the web that publish AMP pages, such as the New York Times, Priceline, Reddit, Rakuten, Globo, Flipkart, Al Jazeera, and more. You can see a bunch of them here. Billions of AMP pages are now served by millions of domains globally. And with so many different platforms and sites using AMP, the amount of traffic going to AMP pages has increased significantly. In fact, we're really excited that over the last year, there were 30% more clicks to AMP pages from Google Search than in the year prior, which is a pretty tremendous amount of growth for the format and the sites that are building with it. Now, while AMP started as a format for websites, it's now much more than that. And so what we want to do today is let you know about the advances in the framework that the millions of sites using AMP can take advantage of, but also let you know about new web experiences that are being built on top of AMP, such as ads, stories, and email. Now, it's been a long journey since we began the AMP project over 3.5 years ago. Let's take a quick look at how far we've come.
As we've seen, AMP has grown a lot since our earlier days, and the number of developers that are contributing to the project have grown a lot as well. So I just want to take a minute here to thank everyone who has contributed code, ideas, and more importantly, their time and energy into the AMP project. We wouldn't be here without you. Now, AMP has become so much more than its original Accelerated Mobile Pages name. In fact, we're not just on mobile, and we don't just serve pages. So it doesn't make sense for us to use this long and awkward phrase, which is why moving forward, we're just going to be known as the AMP project. No acronym, just a word that signifies great user experiences across the web. And to achieve these great user experiences, we strongly believe in our vision and mission. AMP strives for a strong user-first open web forever. And to achieve that, we're supporting the long-term success of web publishers, merchants, and advertisers using the project. And at the core of this mission is a representation of all stakeholders of the web. And to make AMP better reflect these stakeholders, we've changed our governance model to formally include voices from across the web. The governance is just actually a fancy word for the rules and the groups that govern our project. This includes our technical steering committee and our advisory committee, which bring a more diverse set of perspectives into the project, as well as the working groups where the daily execution of the project actually takes place. And these working groups are in fact the easiest way to contribute to AMP, and we'd love to see all of you participating in these groups. And speaking of working on AMP, let's actually walk you through some of the improvements that we've made to AMP sites. Now, when anyone thinks of the web platform, they think of three main pillars: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. However, while AMP itself was written in JavaScript, so far when you built an AMP site, you only had HTML and CSS at your disposal. And this led many developers to think that AMP was incomplete. However, that is changing now. Based on a revolutionary technology called Worker DOM, we're now able to bring AMP script, an extension that allows you to run JavaScript within your own AMP documents. We see AMP script as being useful to help you meet the last mile in achieving a full AMP-first experience. It can help you unblock things such as custom business logic that we can't support in AMP, or really creating a rich interactive experience in AMP. And speaking of rich and interactive experiences, here's a demo of an interactive Washington Post article that we recreated using AMP script. Now, this article has various interactive components that are hard to do in AMP right now, such as responding to click events or binding input fields to other things in the page, such as text or chart. This article really shows how AMP script can help you create complex interactive experiences within the AMP project. And for those of you who are interested, AMP script is now available under Origin trial, and you can sign up for it here. And speaking of JavaScript, one of the most popular ways to actually create AMP pages is through React server-side rendering. And that's because on slower devices, rendering an initial page can take a really long time and can lead to a degraded user experience. But by offloading this computation to a more powerful server, you can minimize the time that a user spends waiting, and thereby ensure that your conversion rates don't suffer. Now, server-side rendering is in fact how Pinterest deploys AMP pages. But so far, organizations like Pinterest have just had to roll out their own thing. This is changing, however, because Next.js, one of the most popular frameworks for React, is providing first-class support for AMP. They've put a lot of thought into creating the best possible developer experience. And we can say that because Next.js's own website is actually an active AMP site. Now, last year, we also talked about an experimental web technology called web packaging or signed exchanges. They're a standardization effort that enable publishers to safely make their content portable while still keeping the actual content's integrity and attribution. And turns out that AMP itself is a portable content unit, and signed exchanges can in fact be used to fix AMP's #1 problem, that pesky google.com URL. And since we last talked about signed exchanges, they've launched in Chrome Stable, and signed exchange support has also launched in Google Search. This means that you can now get instant loading within your own domain. And on top of fixing the URL issue you see here, this also makes stuff like analytics, cookies, and storage that much easier. And if this intrigues you, there are actually two ways that you can deploy signed exchange pages. The first, the do-it-yourself method, is by installing a new software called AMP Packager. But to be honest, this can be a bit difficult to set up, which is why Cloudflare has launched their own service called AMP Real URL, a tool that automatically provides signed exchanges for all your AMP pages. And to turn it on, all you have to do is toggle on the feature in the Cloudflare admin tool. Just that easy. Now let's quickly take a look at something that the AMP team is excited about in our future. Currently, a large number of developers will create separate versions of their pages that are using AMP and then link to them from their canonical HTML page. This is what we call a paired AMP approach. Now, while this does provide an incremental way to amp up your pages, it does mean that you have two versions of your content to maintain at all times, adding extra overhead. And this is why we instead advocate that developers spend their time following an AMP-first approach, where they create a great canonical AMP experience for their sites from scratch, thereby allowing them to create a performant and engaging user experience. And AMP-first is great, but one valid concern that developers have shown over time is that when adopting AMP-first for their websites, they have to go all in and spend a lot of time and energy making their site perfectly valid AMP. But with AMP script, we're intending to make the idea of meeting the last mile of needs that much easier, so that you can add your own custom business logic that can't be supported in AMP with great ease. But what about everything that comes before that last mile? Engineering teams will still have to spend a lot of resources with no intermediate gains. And so to better make this easier, we're supporting a new project called Bento AMP, an effort that allows you to pick and choose the parts of AMP that you want to use in your page, thereby providing you with a much easier ramp-up experience so that you can have a much better AMP-first site while having great intermediate steps. We can do this because by ramping up the Bento AMP quotient of your page, you're basically slowly scaling up your page from an HTML page to an AMP page by adding more AMP components over time. Now, this is an initial exploration on our end, and we're really excited to delve into this technical problem. If you have more questions regarding Bento AMP, please do find us at the AMP booth in the sandbox later. Now, every day, hundreds of open source contributors, as you just saw, and dozens of full-time engineers are working on making AMP pages better. This leads us to think that by actually leveraging AMP as the infrastructure team to your product engineering team, and by using AMP as a service, engineering teams can focus on their product and their product's users and offload all other painful tasks onto AMP's infrastructure team. Now, to better understand this, let's actually take a look at a product lifecycle and how AMP can help here. Now, as a team, when you're kicking off a new project and you're picking the set of technologies to use, you're trying to look for something that can help you prototype quickly. And AMP can help here. AMP's goal is to make web development concepts easier to deploy in all AMP pages. This allows the engineering team to abstract away the technical stack that they're working on and focus on the product and its users. And a great example of how AMP can reduce the amount of time that it takes to deploy a difficult-to-understand concept is this push for websites to merge the speed, the performance, and offline experience offered by apps with the meritocracy and the easy access that is a trademark of the web. And the way developers often do this is by deploying it as a progressive web app, which uses a service worker to enable a great offline experience. Now, usually, setting up a service worker is hard, and understanding how it fits into other frameworks is another beast altogether. AMP, however, intends to make this much easier with one-line service worker, a tool that will promote your AMP pages to a network-resilient PWA AMP experience without the engineer having to worry about rolling out their own service worker. And to actually see the one-line service worker in action, you can just go visit amp.dev, which actually utilizes it. Now, once you've got your MVP sorted, the next step is to scale it into a fully fledged viable product. You retain the value proposition of your MVP, and you augment it with great user experience. And AMP can help here by ensuring that all AMP code reflects the best UI practices as and when they're discovered. And one such example is our ability to ensure that all AMP components actually meet high accessibility standards as set out by the W3C. And another way that we can help you is performance. Now, those of you who walked past the performance budget booth in the web sandbox yesterday would have seen a sign that said that 40% of sites that spend a lot of time improving their sites will regress on performance within 6 months. However, the work that our performance working group does in monitoring and improving AMP's load and runtime performance makes sure that all AMP documents, while being feature heavy, are not performance slow. Another way that AMP can help you create great user experiences is, like I mentioned before, by just allowing you to offload painful tasks such as dependency management. And this is possible because AMP provides you with an evergreen release, where every week we update the runtime that governs all AMP pages, as well as the individual AMP extensions that make up an AMP page. This allows the AMP team to offer all AMP developers cutting-edge updates and features. Now, the most painful and the last part of any project is its long-term maintenance. Engineering teams will tell you that their code does not age gracefully, and that it's quite the opposite, in fact. But AMP can really help reduce the burden here. And we do so by helping ensure that all engineers deploying AMP experiences are always on the correct path. AMP engineering teams deploying AMP experiences are able to leverage the expertise of the 800+ contributors that contribute to the project for free. And these improvements that are being made to the project are then passed on to your product's end users without any involvement from the engineering team. And let's take a look at how we've made some of these improvements that you can get for free. One example is a new update that we recently released to AMP List that allows you to actually create an infinite list of items for your customers to peruse without having to click for more content, thereby increasing engagement. Here you can see an infinite list of items as it's been deployed on AliExpress. And we also have more components that we're releasing in AMP in the near future. One example is AMP Autocomplete, a component that helps your website users input data at lightning speed by auto-suggesting answers. And here's a demo that you can see that helps you calculate the distance between two airports. If this intrigues you, AMP Autocomplete is currently available under experimental, and we would love your feedback. Now, we have also over time received a large amount of feedback regarding our carousel component. And we hear you and are working on releasing a new set of carousel primitives that help developers address real business use cases, such as picture galleries, as you can see here, as well as related products with great ease. Now, another project that the AMP team has taken on is that of refreshing our loaders. And these are our new loaders. And the first loader that you can see here is one that will appear for all content that appears on AMP pages, be it iframes, lists, or carousels. The second loader that you see here is a content-aware loader, one that helps you understand what content to expect. The Pinterest badge over here, as you can see, allows the user to understand that the next component that will show up is an AMP Pinterest embed. And the third loader is basically it replaces the static loading indicator with a blurry placeholder image to really help the transition from loading to an actual image, thereby reducing the jarringness for those on slow network connections. Now let's quickly talk about the tools that help you serve AMP pages and the improvements we've made there. AMP Toolbox Optimizer currently generates transformed AMP pages that offer great loading experiences even if the page isn't served from the cache. The demo here that you can see shows how fast an optimized page can perform on a low-end device such as a Moto G4. And this demo shows that amp.dev actually went to first meaningful paint in half the time. However, publishing transformed AMP documents has always been tedious because they're considered invalid AMP by the validator. However, coming soon, the AMP Toolbox Optimizer will be changed next week to allow us to even mark these transformed pages as valid so that you can actually leverage this benefit even when you aren't being served from the cache. Now, if all of this really intrigued you, and if you're an e-commerce developer who wants to learn more about how AMP can help you create a great experience, on stage tomorrow at stage 5 will be Ben Morris and Alan Kent, who will actually talk about how AMP can really help in the e-commerce sector as well. And that is how, by using AMP as a service and leveraging AMP as the infrastructure counterpart to your engineering team, you can easily get started creating your MVP while providing a great user experience to all your users, while simultaneously reducing the burden of long-term maintenance for your engineers. Now, this is how AMP helps an engineering team out. And earlier we talked about AMP's mission, which included the part to support the long-term success of every web publisher and advertiser. This means that folks need to make money.
Okay, so speaking of making money, let's talk about monetization, ads, and e-commerce. And we'll start with a new ad format itself, in this case with AMP HTML ads. Now, a few years ago, we realized that the same performance tech used on AMP pages could be applied to ads. since many ad experiences suffer from a lot of the same types of performance issues that the web at large suffers from. And so we set out on a mission to reinvent ads on the web based on user-first technology, and that led us to AMP HTML ads. Now that ecosystem has grown a lot in the few years we've been at it. AMP HTML ads now make up 12% of all display ads served by Google, which is a pretty large number. And it's really important to note that serving AMP HTML ads works both on AMP as well as non-AMP pages. They are not limited to AMP pages. Now they're fast, and that speed can mean improved publisher revenues and advertiser ROI. So let's look at a couple examples. Sonet, a Japanese DSP, has seen huge decreases in ad load time via their Logic ad product, which led to a 12% improvement in click-through rates and an 11% reduction in overall in cost per acquisition. The Spanish newspaper El País and the car company Volkswagen ran an experiment that combined AMP pages from El País with AMP HTML ads and AMP landing pages from Volkswagen, and the result was significant: a 76% conversion uplift and a 43% decrease in cost per acquisition. But in addition to the new AMP HTML ad format, publishers themselves are faring well with monetization on AMP pages directly. And that's partly because we've launched a number of features for monetizing AMP pages. And over the last year, we've seen huge growth in adoption here, resulting in 300% more ad requests from publisher AMP pages compared to the year prior for publishers using Ad Manager and AdSense. Now, one publisher who has seen success with monetizing AMP pages is the Times of India, one of the largest publishers in India. Their AMP pages load 3 times faster than non-AMP pages, and that meant that they were able to improve per-page revenue yield by a pretty remarkable 50%. Now, AMP is also a good solution for e-commerce sites, as well as for landing pages that load from ads themselves. Sometimes that means sites like 1-800-Flowers, which have seen success by making AMP a core part of their web strategy. But e-commerce also includes the platforms that power many of the retail and shopping sites on the web, and Shopify is a good example here. It's one of the largest platforms out there with hundreds of thousands of online stores on their platform. And they support AMP through Shopify apps, which is a type of widget specific to the Shopify platform that individual stores can install onto their own sites. There are 6 apps that currently provide great AMP versions of the Shopify storefront, and over 20,000 individual stores have installed these apps to date. One of them is Amplify Me, which worked with Simply Carbon Fiber, a luxury lifestyle brand. And they saw page load speeds decrease from more than 6 seconds to less than 1 second with AMP, which meant that mobile users went about 1 page deeper into the website when starting out on AMP pages. Now, speed and user experience are also important when it comes to conversions, which is why 2 of the leading platforms for powering conversions via landing pages, Unbounce and Instapage, have decided to go all in on AMP and provide this as a turnkey service for their users. These services are really relevant because they are popular with Google Ads, which used to be known as AdWords. Last year, AMP launched for Google Ads, and today we're seeing the vast majority of AMP pages receive the highest possible speed score of 10 out of 10 on that platform. And this means advertisers are seeing improved load times, decreased bounce rates, and an overall lift in conversions when linking to AMP pages from their Google Ad campaigns. Now, in order to understand how AMP pages are working for you, you need to be able to measure performance. So let's talk about what's going on with AMP and analytics. We've been working closely with the analytics community since the AMP project launched, and today there are over 70 vendors that take advantage of AMP analytics' way of measurement. This includes companies like Chartbeat, Nielsen, Segment, Parsley, and many more. And we've worked with developers to build a variety of features into the AMP analytics component that they can take advantage of. This includes AMP Linker, which can help with accurate measurement even when third-party cookie access is restricted. AMP Recaptcha, which now supports Recaptcha version 3, and that helps web development teams further combat spam. AMP Readiness, a Chrome extension that can get you up and running with AMP Analytics in no time. AMP Tag Test, where you can easily validate whether your identifiers are being passed from page to page. And AMP Insights, which gives you a pre-built AMP Analytics dashboard that we created based on feedback from the analytics community. Now, there's one more area that we know is critical in the analytics space, and that's A/B testing. You see A/B testing everywhere on the web. Most of the websites you visit today are testing one thing or another. But these tests usually come at a pretty big cost to the user in terms of performance. Now, AMP has long supported A/B testing on AMP pages, but it lacks some flexibility because it required developers to build pages with experimentation in mind. However, more often than not, you have a dev team deploying the pages, and then a separate team entirely that is responsible for testing them and for experimentation. And these teams rely on third-party A/B testing tools to create experiments and analyze results. To make this easier in AMP, we're working with Optimizely and Oracle Maximizer to support AMP Experiment. Now, this has been one of the most requested features and integrations when it comes to AMP and analytics, so we're really excited about it. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. And there are two more areas of AMP that we want to update you on, which are stories and email. So let's start with stories. Stories are the first new medium that was truly born on mobile. They feel native on your phone in a way that nothing else really does. They are everywhere, and users love them. But the state of the stories ecosystem today is that stories are in many places, but they're also confined to those places. And stories are not on the web. They aren't shareable, linkable, or findable across the largest distribution platform that exists, which is, of course, the open web. So that is where AMP Stories comes in. They combine the power of the open web with the mobile-first stories format that users love. Now, last year, we introduced a developer preview of the AMP Stories format. And since then, we've seen publishers create beautiful, engaging stories about a wide range of topics. You can see several examples here. With AMP Stories, you as the creator are in control, with a unique set of benefits. AMP Stories are yours to do what you wish with, just like your own web page. This includes the fact that you own the content, you control the monetization, and you can design and distribute the content exactly as you'd like. That also means that you can let stories live for as long or as little as you want, because many creators have told us that they prefer less ephemerality to the format. There isn't a platform dictating what you have to do, aside from the web itself. Now, another feature that is unique about AMP Stories is that the desktop experience can be excellent as well. And because AMP Stories are on the web, this essentially comes for free using standard responsive design techniques. Now, we worked with the Washington Post on this full bleed desktop experience, which looks pretty great. And it's really exciting that just a couple weeks ago, Washington Post contributor Lorenzo Tugnoli was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for feature photography for his rich and riveting photographs capturing the human toll of the war in Yemen, one of which you can see here. This award-winning work appeared in a Washington Post AMP story. And this AMP story presentation was so visually striking that it was submitted to the Pulitzer Committee itself as the web document representing this work. Now, advertising for stories is really important as well, and publishers can now work directly with advertisers to serve full-screen, beautiful ads. The ad only shows if it is loaded by the time the user gets there, which means the user never sees a blank ad. And if the user doesn't like the ad, they just tab on, just like they would on any other story page. We think it's a really nice combination of an attractive advertising space and also a great user experience. Story ads are now live within Google Ad Manager, allowing publishers to deliver direct sold campaigns on their AMP stories, just like they do on their web pages. And later this summer, advertisers will be able to programmatically target and deliver story ads using DV360 across all publisher stories using Google Ad Manager. And when it comes to creating stories themselves, we know that it requires great tools. And this is something that has, for the most part, been lacking to date, but that's changing now. And there are a whole slew of great new tools that are coming online. They've either launched or they're going to launch soon. And we wanted to share a couple of them with you. One of them is Make Stories, an end-to-end drag-and-drop tool for creating stories with integrations into your favorite CMS. Another is Newsroom Studio, a powerful story creation platform that is specifically engineered for publishers looking to embed tappable formats into both editorial and commercial workflows. WordPress recently launched a beta of the new AMP plugin for WordPress, and it comes with a built-in drag-and-drop editor for AMP stories that will be available once this beta becomes the stable version. And finally, there's Unfold, one of the top story creation tools out there that is used by millions of creators worldwide, which is integrating AMP stories support. And this will be launching this summer as part of a new premium version of their product. Okay, so the AMP Stories format is gaining features, monetization is coming along, and there's momentum with creation tools. But what about Google? Now, as we mentioned, Google launched a developer preview for AMP Stories and recently announced that it's expanding the ways in which it wants to show stories to its users. This includes new ways of showing stories on search, but also Google Discover. Discover is a feature within Google Search that helps users stay up to date on their favorite topics without needing a query. Its traction is very strong. There are over 800 million people that use the feed each month to stay up to date on their interests. And you might have spotted stories showing up in the Discover feed already in the US, and we're working on more placements for stories in Discover, as well as on launching in more countries over the coming months. Now, Google Search is also a surface on which it makes sense to share stories with users. In fact, a couple weeks ago, Google announced that it is creating a dedicated block for visual stories on search result pages. In the first phase, that will start with travel-related stories, but it'll later move on to things like gaming, fashion, TV, movies, and more. Now, since stories is a completely new medium, this will start out as a bit of an experiment, and will ramp up in the coming months as more story content becomes available. So for all of you in the room or watching on the live stream, we hope you'll start to create new stories to fill this block on search with life. For more on AMP stories, make sure to check out the AMP Stories talk tomorrow at 9:30 here at Google I/O. It's on stage 2 or on the live stream. Okay, let's talk about one more area, which is AMP for email. AMP for email is a new way of formatting email that enables full HTML fidelity plus the features of AMP, and it makes email interactive and dynamic, opening up a whole new set of possibilities for engaging directly in an email, and that allows for things like RSVPing to events, filling out questionnaires, or browsing a photo slideshow. And the format lets senders keep emails up to date, displaying the freshest content available. Tons of senders have already started using AMP for email, but this is one example of AMP for email in a particularly useful way. Google launched AMP for email comment notifications for Google Docs, allowing you to comment directly in a doc into the notification email you've received. So you don't actually need to go into the doc itself, and it really speeds up the workflow when you're collaborating on projects. Now, AMP for email is now available to all Gmail and G Suite users, and other mail clients are adopting the format as well. This includes mail.ru, which recently launched to all users, as well as to Yahoo Mail, Outlook, and hopefully other email platforms soon. And while it's still early days for AMP in email, since the product only launched to consumers in Gmail about 6 weeks ago, the job site Indeed is already seeing a 2x increase in clicks on their AMP job alert emails. And Oyo, one of India's largest hospitality companies, is seeing a 60% conversion lift for visitors coming in via AMP emails. You can learn more about the AMP for email format tomorrow at the talk here at Google I/O on stage 5. One of the things that's cool about all these new AMP use cases is that we're seeing more and more companies take advantage of AMP in multiple ways, and Pinterest is a great example of that. They've made AMP the building blocks for how they approach the open web, and that includes the fact that Pinterest is one of the largest producers of AMP pages on the planet. They also link out to AMP pages from other content sites directly within their product. They're exploring using AMP stories, and they're one of the first senders to take advantage of the new AMP for email format that we just saw.
Now, as a reminder of what we just discussed today, for websites, AMP is getting better every day, and we're upgrading every app website along the way, and this is AMP as a service. We've made major transformations in the advertising space based on AMP, and publishers are seeing major success monetizing their AMP websites. We're also deploying tools that will help you better analyze the performance of your site. The AMP Stories format is getting more mature with more tools coming on board and Google gaining support. And we're very excited about this, about how AMP for email is really transforming the email space. And for those of you who are curious about our roadmap, this is what we have coming up. For AMP websites, we're really consciously thinking about how we can create great app-like experiences on the web while still supporting the AMP community with building blocks like payments. For AMP Stories, we're looking to make the stories more engaging by adding embeds and reactions, and we're also making them more personalized by offering branching stories. In the ad space, we want to really increase the coverage of AMP HTML ads while making sure that the format is capable of supporting advertiser needs while still being performant for the user. And for AMP emails, we're looking to make sure that all providers are compatible with each other while adding more support for the format.
We know there are still a bunch of complex problems to solve for in the AMP world, but we're excited about the progress to date, and we thank you for joining us on this journey. You can find out just about everything you'd like to know on our new website, amp.dev, and we'll also be around after the talk if there are any questions. Thank you all.